A homeless girl met a young American billionaire. What he did became the talk of the town. They say when you reach the top of the world, the view is breathtaking. No one tells you how lonely it is up there. Ethan Caldwell had everything most people spend their entire lives chasing. At 29, he was worth more than small cities. Founder of one of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence companies in America. Young. Brilliant. Disciplined. Untouchable. Magazines called him visionary. Investors called him strategic. Employees called him relentless. But if you had walked into his penthouse at night, long after the interviews and handshakes and headlines had ended, you would have found a man sitting alone in front of a grand piano. The city lights of Manhattan stretching endlessly beneath him. And his fingers moving across the keys with perfect precision. Every note technically flawless. Every note emotionally hollow. Ethan had not always been hollow. There was a time when music had meant survival. He grew up in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Queens. His mother worked double shifts cleaning office buildings downtown. She used to leave him alone with a second-hand keyboard that had 3 broken keys and 1 permanent buzz in the speaker. He would play for hours. Not because he thought it would make him rich, but because it made the noise of their life feel softer. At 12, he earned a scholarship to a prestigious music academy. He was the poor kid among prodigies. The one with discount shoes and borrowed sheet music. But when he played, none of that mattered. Music was the one place where he didn't feel behind. Then at 19, someone told him something that changed everything. An investor who had seen his early coding projects leaned across a cafe table and said, "You're talented. But music doesn't scale. Software does." It sounded practical. Logical. Responsible. His mother was still cleaning offices at night. He chose software. And slowly, quietly, music became something he used to do. His company exploded. Investors poured in. Startups acquired. Headlines multiplied. The boy who once counted quarters for subway fare became the man who moved markets with a sentence. He bought the penthouse. He bought the cars. He bought the illusion of control. But somewhere along the climb, he stopped feeling anything that wasn't scheduled. Success became maintenance. Maintenance became routine. Routine became silence. Until the night a red traffic light refused to change. It was colder than usual that evening. The kind of Manhattan winter that seeps through expensive coats just to prove it can. Ethan was in the back of his electric SUV, reviewing acquisition documents on a glowing tablet. Outside, traffic stalled. And then he heard it. A violin. Not the polished, concert hall kind. This sound trembled. Not from lack of skill. From exposure. From cold. From hunger. He looked up. On the sidewalk stood a girl who couldn't have been older than 16. Her coat hung too large on her shoulders. Her boots were thin and cracked at the sides. Her breath floated in the air between notes. At her feet sat an open violin case. Inside were a few crumpled bills. And a cardboard sign. Trying to get into Juilliard. Living in a shelter. Cars passed her like she was scenery. A man brushed past and muttered, "Get a job." She didn't stop playing. The light turned green. The driver glanced back for instruction. Ethan didn't speak. He opened the door. The city noticed immediately. A few people recognized him. Phones lifted instinctively. The girl stopped playing when she saw him approaching. Her posture stiffened. Experience had taught her that powerful men walking toward her rarely meant opportunity. He stood there for a moment, listening to the silence she had left behind. "What were you playing?" he asked gently. She studied him. Not impressed. Not intimidated. Just cautious. Something I'll probably never get to play inside, she replied. Her voice carried no drama. Just fact. Why not? He asked. She gave a small shrug. Inside costs money. That sentence hit him harder than it should have. Not because it was clever. Because it was true. He glanced at the violin in her hands. The wood was worn. The bow hair uneven. But she held it like it mattered. Do you know Claire de Lune? He asked. She hesitated. Then nodded. Without another word, she lifted the violin back to her shoulder. The first notes drifted into the air. Soft. Vulnerable. Exposed. Ethan didn't announce himself. Didn't offer cash. Didn't posture for cameras. He sat down on the curb beside her. Right there on the cold concrete. And he listened. For 3 minutes, Manhattan slowed. Taxis idled. Pedestrians paused. Phones recorded. But for Ethan, none of that existed. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a CEO. He wasn't a brand. He was a boy in a laundromat apartment again. Listening to music make the world feel survivable. When she finished, the silence lingered before applause began. Not polite applause. Surprised applause. The kind that comes from witnessing something unfiltered. Ethan stood slowly. He didn't hand her a check. He didn't promise anything. He simply said, "You should keep playing." And walked back to his car. By morning, the video had exploded across the internet. They called it the Sidewalk Symphony. They called it heartwarming. They called it humanizing. Inside Caldwell AI headquarters, they called it dangerous. His head of public relations requested an emergency meeting before noon. Investors had questions. Board members had concerns. They had run a background check on the girl. Her name was Lily Harper. Mother deceased from untreated illness 3 years earlier. Father incarcerated after a violent confrontation with an abusive landlord. Multiple foster placements. 1 juvenile shoplifting incident. She's unstable, one board member said carefully. If you align your image with hers, you inherit her unpredictability. Ethan listened. Expression neutral. They suggested a quiet donation. A scholarship fund in her name. Distance maintained. Clean. Safe. Strategic. But strategy had never sounded so empty. That evening, without security or press, Ethan found himself standing outside the women's shelter listed in public records. He hesitated before entering. The lobby was small. Fluorescent lights humming faintly. And there she was. Sitting in a plastic chair in the corner, practicing softly. She looked up when she sensed someone watching. Recognition flickered across her face. Not excitement. Suspicion. He held out a violin case. I had this restored, he said. She didn't reach for it immediately. How long are you staying? She asked. The question confused him. She clarified. How long before you disappear like everyone else? He didn't answer right away. Because for the first time in a long time. He didn't know. She kept her eyes on him while he slowly set the violin case down on the chair beside her. I'm not here for a photo, he said quietly. She studied his face like she was searching for a crack in it. You already got that, she replied. There was no bitterness in her voice. Just experience. After a long moment, she opened the case. Inside was a violin that had clearly lived before. The wood carried history. The varnish glowed softly under the fluorescent lights. Not brand new. Not extravagant. But repaired with care. She ran her fingers along the strings. It was the first time he saw her expression change. Not into a smile. Into relief. You fixed it, she whispered. He nodded. She lifted it to her shoulder. Played a single note. It rang fuller than the one on the sidewalk. Stronger. Something inside her steadied. Something inside him shifted. That night, he didn't leave quickly. He stayed while she practiced. He corrected her posture gently. She corrected his tempo once, and to her surprise, he laughed. It was a small sound. But real. Over the next few weeks, he returned. Not as a billionaire. As a musician who once stopped playing. They practiced in hallways. In empty classrooms borrowed after hours. In quiet corners of the shelter. And slowly, cautiously, trust formed. She told him about her mother. About hospital bills that never stopped. About the landlord who raised rent when he found out they were behind. About the night her father snapped. He said he was protecting us, she murmured once, staring at the violin in her hands. But now I'm the only one left. Ethan didn't try to fix that. He simply listened. But the world outside was not listening. It was speculating. Photos surfaced online of him entering the shelter. Headlines shifted tone. Billionaire's curious obsession. PR move or something more. Comment sections turned vicious. Strangers who had never met her debated her character. Strangers who had never met him questioned his motives. Caldwell AI stock dropped 5% in 2 days. His board demanded distance. The shelter director called him into her office. She was kind. But firm. They're calling here, she said softly. Reporters. Bloggers. They want statements. She hesitated. For her safety, it would be better if you stopped coming. He nodded. He understood optics. He understood risk. He told Lily he'd be away for a while. She didn't argue. She just gave a small nod. And something in her eyes closed. Days passed. Then weeks. He stayed away. The noise died down. The headlines moved on. But inside the shelter, Lily kept glancing toward the door during practice. He never walked through it. Her Juilliard audition arrived quietly. She wore borrowed black flats that were slightly too tight. She traveled alone. The hall was immaculate. Polished floors. Perfect acoustics. Neutral faces behind a long table. She played beautifully. Every note carried every hallway she had practiced in. Every stairwell echo. Every cold sidewalk memory. When she finished, one of the panelists asked gently. Your permanent address? Her hands tightened. Current sponsor? Silence. The room shifted subtly. Not unkind. Just practical. She felt it. The invisible wall. She left before they could formally decline. That night, she didn't return to the shelter. No one noticed until the next morning. Ethan found out 2 days later. The news didn't come from a headline. It came from the shelter director's tired voice. She's gone. The word echoed inside him. Gone. He searched quietly. No press. No announcements. He visited the places he'd seen her mention casually. The subway station where acoustics were good. The park bench near the river. The tunnel near 34th Street where musicians sometimes gathered. And there she was. Under flickering fluorescent light. Playing to a scattering of commuters who barely slowed down. Her coat thinner now. Her face sharper. She saw him before he reached her. She stopped playing. You shouldn't be here, she said flatly. I was looking for you, he replied. She let out a small laugh. That's funny. He stepped closer. You left. She shook her head. You left first. That hit harder. He tried to explain. The board. The shelter. The pressure. But explanations sound like excuses to someone who has been abandoned enough. People like you visit, she said quietly. You get inspired. You feel something. Then it gets complicated. And you disappear. She removed the violin from her shoulder. Placed it carefully in its case. And handed it back to him. I don't need charity, she said. Then she walked away. He didn't follow. Not because he didn't want to. Because he finally understood that chasing her in that moment would be about easing his guilt. Not earning her trust. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't scheduled. Powerlessness. Back at headquarters, the board moved forward. Emergency review. Potential reduction of executive authority. The Innovation Summit was approaching. Global live stream. Major investors attending. He was scheduled to deliver the keynote address. The script had been polished for weeks. Safe. Predictable. Optimized. His head of PR met him backstage. If you make any unpredictable moves tonight, she warned carefully. The board will initiate removal proceedings immediately. He nodded. Then opened his phone. Scrolled to a contact he hadn't used in weeks. Lily's. He typed only one sentence. There's an anonymous performance slot tonight. No name attached. Just music. He didn't sign it. He didn't explain it. He just sent it. Minutes before stepping on stage, he received a response. I'll be there. The ballroom was dazzling. Screens towering. Lights blinding. Ethan walked out to applause. He began the speech exactly as rehearsed. Artificial intelligence. Global efficiency. Predictive modeling. The future. Then he stopped mid-sentence. The silence stretched. I'd like to test something, he said calmly. The lights dimmed. A translucent screen lowered onto the stage. Behind it, a silhouette appeared. A violin lifted. The first note filled the room. It was her. But the audience didn't know. They only heard brilliance. The live stream chat flooded instantly. Who is that? This is unreal. Why does this feel different? Halfway through the piece, Ethan stepped away from the podium. Walked toward the screen. And with one smooth motion, he pulled it aside. Gasps rippled across the room. Recognition spread like electricity. The homeless girl from the viral video. The one the blogs had mocked. The one investors had feared. She froze for a fraction of a second. He leaned close and whispered. You're not invisible. Her fingers steadied. She kept playing. Stronger now. Fiercer. The final note rang out. Silence. Then a standing ovation that felt less like politeness and more like release. Ethan stepped back to the microphone. This isn't charity, he said quietly. This is correction. He announced the launch of a foundation. Housing. Education. Blind arts auditions nationwide. Funded by 15% of his personal shares. The applause continued. But in his pocket, his phone vibrated. Board vote passed. He had been removed as CEO. By morning, headlines were ruthless. Caldwell ousted after emotional stunt. Billionaire's reckless gamble. Analysts debated his fall. Stock stabilized without him. He packed his office quietly. No press conference. No dramatic exit. Just silence. But something unexpected happened. Employees began circulating petitions. Artists spoke publicly in support. Small investors demanded reconsideration. The live stream performance crossed 50 million views. Not because it was strategic. Because it was undeniable. Within weeks, negotiations reopened. He returned. Not as untouchable founder. As accountable leader. With oversight. With humility. Changed. 1 year later, a concert hall in Manhattan dimmed its lights. Lily Harper walked onto the stage. No cardboard sign. No borrowed shoes. Juilliard scholarship secured. Housing included. The audience waited. She lifted the violin. And began to play. Not for survival. Not for proof. For joy. Ethan stood in the back row. No cameras on him. No headlines waiting. Just a quiet man listening. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a billionaire can do is sit down on a sidewalk and remember how to feel again. And sometimes, the girl the world almost ignored becomes the reason the world changes.